This is Resonance, a podcast for leaders that unpacks the power of song, silence, and strategy.
We believe that great leadership begins with deep listening, not just to others, but to the still small voice within.
It's not just about being a successful leader, it's about being soulfully aligned as well.
In a world moving fast, Resonance invites you to pause and reconnect with purpose, people, and possibility.
We'll dive into some cool stories, celebrate with friends, and dig deep into the music too. 'Cause song has a way of saying what words cannot alone.
So whether you're leading a business, a team, or just trying to lead your own life with more meaning, this is Resonance.
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 Welcome back to Resonance. I'm here with my buddies Steve Azar and Randy Harrington for another episode of the always compelling Resonance podcast. So today we're going to really lean on Steve a little bit, because today we're going to talk about the idea of collaboration and conflict and how the creative tension can produce magic. We're going to talk about the idea that the best music often comes from that creative tension that happens when collaboration happens. And sometimes we don't always agree on things, but as you sort through that collaboration, it really begins to blossom into something magic. And so I'm going to jump right in and kick it over to Steve. And Steve, maybe you can share a story of sort of the idea of collaboration and maybe where it was a little dicey at first.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to take you off the beaten path a little bit, but it'll wind up where we want to be, I believe. Let's talk about my biggest radio hit, I Don't Have to Be Me Till Monday. First of all, I had played golf with R.C. Bannon, who at one point in his life was married to Louise Mandrell. He wrote a lot of the Mandrell sisters back in the TV days, was writing all that music. And he was working for RCA Records when I first went, probably 10th time to go to Nashville from the age of 14 to 27. But I was 27 when I went there for good, for 20 years, for the next 20 years. And he was one of the guys I went to see, and they were looking for a hat act. And he heard my music and he looked at me and he took me to Houston's restaurant there. And he goes, "Obviously you're not a hat act. And I see no buckle because my t-shirts are hanging out." And, and I said, "No, I don't have buckles and I don't have cowboy hats. It's not me." But we wound up, he was a big time golfer trying to make it to the seniors tour at one point, which he did. He fell short. But we found each other playing. Mike, you'll really appreciate this. Randy, you got to stick with us. Found us playing in the Music City tournament. It was the first one I ever played in. And I won it that day, and RC finished second. And we became golf partners. And over the next 8 years, we played golf, and we'd play a lot of one-day tournaments. I can't tell you how many tournaments we won. It was in the 30s or 40s, like a lot of one-day, four-ball events. We were like clockwork. We were really good together. And we could almost plan the golf course out, that we played a lot of the similar golf courses, but we knew them, and we could almost plan out which hole was better for each one of us. And we were almost pulling off what we were calling. And that's hard in golf, but both of them were playing really good, and we were real comfortable and relaxed with each other. In comes us finally deciding, hey, I wonder if we wrote a song together. We've never done that. We never wrote. Now I'm writing with everybody and we're doing all this stuff, and all of a sudden we get together, and he was in the room with me when we wrote I Don't Have to Be Me Till Monday. And by the way, we've never written again. It's the biggest hit of my life. So, Jason, my sidekick, and RC were in there, and I scream out, "I don't have to be me till Monday." And because the song was called I'm Free, and I said, we can't do that. Tom Petty already has that. And I'd come out screaming, "I got me a brand new car waiting in the driveway." And I guess it all came out, and they looked at me and said, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know. We were trying to write something else. We weren't getting anywhere." Right. And that just came out, went to lunch, came back, and I spewed out, "I don't have to be me till Monday." So we go play it for our publisher. About a week or two later, we worked, working on the last verses and stuff. And my publisher at the time was Songwriter of the Year. So you're talking about BMI, Songwriter of the Year. That means he had more hits and made more money on BMI than any other songwriter. And he goes, "Well, the title's not right. You mean you want to be yourself till Monday?" And I went, so it's not just the guys writing it. It's going to your publisher who has had all the success in the world, and we've batted maybe zero, right, in a long time. And so he goes, "You want to be yourself?" "No, you mean I want to be myself till Monday." I went, No, that's not the point. my roommate inspired this. I'd been writing like a series of I wrote like a series of 8 or 10 songs. My buddy Doug, who was really struggling, he'd become one of the most successful guys early in his life and was struggling with his health because of winning. He had let himself just go to dust. And he was the best athlete I'd ever seen in my life, pound for pound. So, and he just looked really old when he came to visit me. And we played all these stupid things. We played bowling and pool and we played baseball and we played ping pong and we played golf and we did every stupid thing we did in college. And then when he left over a long weekend, he goes, you know what? I feel so much better. It was good not to be myself. I looked at him and I said, the colors in your face. And so I didn't know what that was. And it was probably a year and a half, 2 years later when that came screaming out of my mouth. So it's interesting. I had written all these other songs about it, but they just weren't any good and they weren't honest and they were trying too hard. So back to the collaboration point, we fought on the title forever and I just didn't give in. And it didn't make sense to give in. So, but you're talking to your co-publisher and your partner who's had all this success and recently had all this success. And you're going you're laying in bed at night, second guessing yourself. He's got to be right because he's the only one with the big hits. Well, turns out he ends up calling one day and goes, I'm totally wrong. You're exactly right. And then guys, we got to the point with the record label when they said, hey, we want to shorten the title. I went, no, DJs like to hear themselves talk. And they want to hear them say, I don't have to be me till, you're right, this long thing. So I had to go through a whole battle with that. And I just feel like if we would have shortened anything or changed the title, I just feel like it may have impacted it a little bit in a negative way. So, but as a team player, I didn't go, y'all are wrong. I can look back and say, you're wrong. I was really in a lot of thought process of going why am I missing something? So I was always kind of pointing my finger, what am I missing? And then as time went on, it fixed itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Randy,
A great story.
Randy, talk about the idea of, okay, so Steve goes through that process. Talk about the idea from a leadership perspective when collaboration is so difficult because of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think particularly creative collaboration, like you're talking about, is extraordinarily difficult because you don't know what's right or true. You're like, is that the right? Maybe it would have been different if the title had been slightly different or whatever. So it's all there's a lot of guesswork. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of feeling involved. And that's really fuel for the fire if there is tension, collaborative tension, which is why I think a lot of very successful bands and partnerships, Simon and Garfunkel and others, when they blow up big time. They really fall apart because it's like, I can't even talk with you anymore. We're obviously in a different place altogether.
Right.
It's no good. So I guess the first thing I would say is that collaboration in general is a capability that is more important now than it has ever been in business. No matter what you want to achieve in business, you cannot do it by yourself. You are going to depend on all kinds of other resources to do it. And the more you can be in an engaged collaboration with those entities that you depend on, whether you agree to it or not, the better off you're going to be. And so that's my first just sort of top line on this whole thing. But let's get right down to the brass tacks. I think that when you have successful collaboration, why you were successful, Steve, is you had the ability to do what's called meta communication. Fancy word that means you can think about communication that you're in. You can think about, well, here's what I think, and I bet this is what they think. And this guy's really good, so he probably thinks that, and he probably thinks this of me. So you're able to kind of game out the system in your mind where everybody's point of view is at least being taken into consideration as you start making the determination. And that's where you said, I never disagreed, because you didn't have to, because you saw yourself as part of a much larger dynamic of communication. And there are a lot of people that don't do that. They either don't have the capacity to do it, or they get emotional and it gets blocked. And so when you have somebody that is just going to die on that hill, I am not going to yield on this no matter what. Best thing to do is just kind of walk away from that moment, because all you're going to do is entrench that individual further and further and create a rift or a split.
I've never been real combative in my life, Mike, just real quick, because I want to hear your take for sure. But I've never been combative. And I've also been in tennis. I was better as a doubles player. On the basketball court, you obviously have 5 guys on the court at all times, in sports, period. So I think that helped me.
Yes.
As much as I like to talk, and you guys know it, I mean, in those situations, I've always been pretty good about not talking and thinking. So that's interesting that you bring that up. Mike, I'm sorry.
Yep. Well, it's interesting too as we talk about this. My favorite book is The Rule of Benedict, and in the second chapter of The Rule of Benedict, it talks about the role of the abbot. And the abbot's role isn't this top-down approach. The abbot's role is to sit within the team and get input. In fact, they say sometimes the best input comes from the new and the young monks because it provides a different perspective than what they're getting from everybody that, from all the monks that have been around for 40 years. So it really is an idea that abbot is to take that and discern that information and really look at, okay, what is best for the overall collective? What is best for the monastery? And in the same way, when we think about collaboration in creating this magic that happens, Steve, if your ego is in the way, and you think this is all about you, that song never happens. I think you would agree, but the fact that you were open to it, you didn't let your ego get in the way. You listened, you got the input from them, you stood your ground, but you still got the input from them to say, okay, I've discerned this out now. I've listened to their side. I still think the name of God is the name that we need to go with. But at least I've been open to that conversation. At least I've been open to that discussion.
That's very interesting, too. You take it one step further for when it was released. So first of all, it sat on record labels' desks for a year and a half. I wrote Waiting on Joe, and Waiting on Joe I didn't even think was a song, so I had to be convinced of that. And then that's what got me signed, Waiting on Joe. And then they were going to go with another song called How Long Is This Time Gonna Be that had just been penned and just recorded, and everything was sort of swirling. And in my heart, I knew that I Don't Have to Be Me Till Monday had to be the lead off. I'd had a false attempt with a really bad record 3 years prior, and I knew that the first song on this record couldn't be complicated, and it had to be this song to continue my career, or I felt like I would be one and done. It really felt like that wasn't just me feeling that. I believe that I would have been one and done. I'm pretty sure. I didn't, but they were all talking about not going there. And so I stayed quiet, and I knew, and I had sleepless nights. I didn't sleep because I knew that this would be, even though I believed in the other songs, I wrote Waiting on Joe by myself, a lot of songs by myself, but it wasn't about that. It was about what was best for the big end goal. And at the 1st hour, they came to me and they said, we've all decided to go with I Don't Have to Be Me Till Monday. And I went, I didn't go, they didn't see me do that. I exhaled greatly inside. But with that said, I was so relieved. I remember getting in the car and driving and going like, thank you. Just thank you, God. Because I knew that my best shot and my only shot to continue was that. And the song was so strong that it came out in 9/10. We've talked about this in the other podcasts before previously, but it was so strong and relevant and connected that it survived coming out 9/10 before 9/11 and remaining in the game until people started feeling better about themselves in our country and starting to be able to, get over some of the pain that you never get over from 9/11. But,
Right.
Obviously the song at the time shouldn't have mattered, and it somehow held its ground. No other song I had could have held its ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think about looking back, but I don't think I've ever thought about it until you guys talked about it today. I guess y'all are kind of making me a little bit nauseous. I got to tell you, thinking about what I could have done wrong.
So, Randy, I know that you've worked with the SEALs, and in your work with the SEALs, talk maybe a little bit about how constructive conflict can really generate good results.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that Steve just said a second ago that I think is super important is that he felt like he learned to be a good team player by playing team sports, and that he felt good at team sports. So he liked playing doubles tennis. And so one of the first things that the SEALs will tell you is that if you can't work with one other person, you can't be on a team. And that's why the minute you get into BUDS, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, the first thing they do is they assign you a swim buddy. And you are going to be no more than 3 feet from that swim buddy all the time. And you are going to win, lose, or draw together. And they're evil people, man. They're going to put you, if you're a short guy, they're going to put you with the tallest guy. If you're from the deep South, they're going to put you with the guy from New York. I mean, they are going to do anything they can to create as much division and diversity between you and your swim buddy as they possibly can. And they will be unrelenting that whatever happens, you guys are going to, survive or not as a pair,
Sink or
as
swim.
a swim pair. That is sink or swim big time. And so I think that that's a fundamental lesson. But what it says to me is that we can use that in organizations too. When I talk to CEOs, I often will say, when you're talking about building a strong C-suite, a leadership team, don't have these just one-on-ones with people, have 2 or 3 on ones where you're really beginning to create that collaborative environment. And when you make a directive to the C-suite, you don't send it to, Joe, you've got to do this by Monday. It needs to be Joe and Susie together. There's always needs to be at least 2 people that are locked in there, and that will build team better than anything else that's out there. But the point that you asked about, though, is this idea of how, and it's what the Abbott was doing, right? The Abbott was recognizing that all the voices in the room are relevant. All of the voices have potential points of view that are going to be valuable here. And I don't want to steal the story because we might get this guy on the show. His name is Steve Alberg. He was a Commodore of the SEAL teams back when I first got involved with them back in around 2000.
Excited when you
Coolest
said,
guy you'd ever.
I got excited when you said Commodore. I'm sorry, musical.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah. He's retired now and living up in Bend, Oregon. He's still a crazy man and he still rides horses and does ridiculous things. But boy, back in the day when I first saw him, I was like jaw dropped by this guy. He was just an amazing individual. He was one of the guys who helped develop the SEAL delivery vehicle, the little mini subs that lock out and go in. Really just crazy, badass stuff that he was involved with. But he told a story about basically an impossible task that the Navy had told him. It was a training task, but they said, we have this technology that's going to prevent anybody from ever sneaking up on a base again. And we want you to break it. We want you to do a red cell test on this. We want you to attack this technology. And so the end of the story is, hopefully we'll get him on. He can tell the whole story because it's fantastic. End of the story is they didn't know what the heck to do. It really was a pretty impenetrable technology. But the youngest guy, this guy, an enlisted guy, newest guy on the team, happens to scratch his head and they're like literally looking through binoculars on a berm down into this valley. And he's like, you know what we could do? And it was just crazy enough that Steve had the wisdom to say, let's do that, let's try that. And in fact, it worked. And so all of the old dudes, all the old salty dogs were like, I don't know. But the young guy's like, hey, let's think of it in this different way. And I am seeing that happen all the time now in businesses where these little, Gen whatever, Gen Y, Gen Z, Gen blah, blah come in and they're all like, I don't even understand what they're saying most of the time. And they've all got their Diet Coke and their skinny jeans and they're just, and then they'll say to me things that make no sense for about 20 minutes. And then they say something that makes me go, wow. One of the things that I heard this past weekend that I thought was fantastic was, why do we have to go learn about AI? And everybody in the rooms, their heads spun around and looked at this person, are you kidding me right now? It's like one of the most important things ever. And he says, my experience is that, if you use AI, you learn AI. So why are we talking about learning AI? Just use the AI and figure out how to use it. That's where you're going to learn it. It's like ding, 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 ding. And when you look at the research, that's exactly the truth. Having people tell you about it won't do it, but you have got to do it. And when you do it, you get it.
I just had that conversation with a client this morning.
Hey,
it's
Mike,
a timely one.
Mike, let me ask you this. Collaboratively speaking, for you, have you had a situation where disagreement led to something that really turned out great, wonderful for the company?
Yeah, I see it. I see it a lot where you get partners or where you get kind of co-leader type situations where sometimes the two of them are just knocking heads. And I know, Randy, you've seen this many times. And when you begin to break down the reasons why they're knocking heads, you begin to look at, okay, let's look at this positive aspect. Let's look at this positive aspect. Let's start to bring those two things together. And then you begin to see magic happen, because then they realize that The only reason that we're beating heads in many cases is we think the same way. We're just thinking differently the same way. So, and so when they begin to break that down and really understand that we really have the same goal, we're really trying to get to the same place, then you begin to start creating conversations. You begin
That's
to
right.
getting them to think differently about what it is they're going to do. And I think so many times, and I love, Randy, I don't know if you've read Adam Grant's book, Think Again.
Oh, no.
Adam Grant talks about the three ways that we typically think. We either think as a preacher, a prosecutor, or a politician,
Yes.
you know.
Yes. Yes. I
And
am familiar with this.
sometimes, I like to use the example with my grandson. Sometimes I think that way all three ways because, the first thing I try and do is convince him that he needs to do something for the benefit of the good of it. And when that doesn't happen, then I try and convince him that, he's either going to do that or he's going to get, pounded figuratively, not literally. Or then when that doesn't work, then you say, well, I'll give you a candy bar if you do it, so you're thinking all three different ways all at the same time. But in reality, Grant talks about thinking more like a scientist. I
Right.
talk about it thinking more like a philosopher, where we constantly are asking questions. And when we
That's right.
begin to ask those questions, we begin to create possibility. And once
Yeah.
we create
Leading by asking questions.
Yep.
Huge.
once
Just do that.
once we create that possibility, that leads to creativity.
There you go.
And so I think that's the process that you see a lot of times with leaders. And once you can get them to break out of the way that they think and to think differently, it opens up the possibility.
Y'all are both bringing up something music business wise that's very, very important. And you have to be vulnerable, obviously, as a songwriter when it comes internally to be able to let it all out without putting up a guard, right? You can't put up a guard. You got to be as honest as you possibly can, no matter how bad it hurts. But when it comes to older songwriters, legendary songwriters, which I've been in the room with, I can tell you the best of the best of the best, the older and better and greater, legendary, all have one thing in common. When they're working with a new artist, they are not going like, here's the way it's done. They are all, it's so interesting you're saying this. You think that they're there to mentor you only, and they're there to mentor you, but they're also there to stay relevant and to understand, especially when they're trying to help you have a career as an artist or a songwriter or both. They're sitting there trying to understand, and they give you all the rope in the world. And they do it because they know that it's important to get the ideas of the next generation because it keeps everything fresh and relevant. But at the same time, the youth has a lot to offer. And, when you're youthful, you're a little bit so naive that you're just sort of splattering at the mouth and you've got all these things and all that. But there's something romantic about it and something that can be very prolific and prophetic at the same time when you're a young artist and you're not thinking as much. Now, when you get a little, you really think everything
Direct
through.
apprehension. Yeah.
Yeah. And your rules, you don't really know the rules yet. There's something nice about the naivete about it. But
Sure.
I think the smartest and the best of the writers, let's forget smart. They're smart because they do this. The best, most legendary songwriters in history have been great about listening to the next generation and willing to work with.
Truly collaborative.
Yes,
Right.
truly collaborative, not
Yeah.
combative.
So there's, Mike, when you were talking, one of the thoughts that came to mind was this very simple idea that everybody can get a hold of, and that is the relationship between ends and means.
Right.
And so when you're working with boards of directors or executives on planning, you often say, what is your ends guidance? And that means, what are you telling us we're trying to achieve? What will it look like? What's the story you want to tell about where we want to be in a year, 3 years, 10 years, 30 years? And that ends point is really critical. If you don't have that defined at some level reasonably clearly, then we're all going to be running around like Keystone Cops and not really know what to do. And then the means is, how do we get to the ends? And that's usually where the tension comes. And so if we're two leaders that are having a fight over the means, I'm a happy guy. That's resolvable.
Yeah.
We can use that scientific principle, for example. We can work that out.
Yeah.
If the fight is over the ends, that's a different story. That's a whole nother level of conflict that you can go after. But I think one of the takeaways today is use the ends and the means thinking in your job.
Okay, how do you even go there a lot? Is everybody on the same page where they're trying to see the end when you're can you see the light for the tunnel, whatever the saying is.
Yeah.
So are you telling me that everybody's on board, or do you think the conflict is that people can't see the end and all they're doing is thinking of what's right in front of them, and they don't have a bigger
That's
mindset,
right.
goal oriented and seeing the end result, and they get stuck right there where they are in the mud?
Yeah. It's the classic story of the brick mason and the guy walks by and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, one guy says, "I'm just mixing concrete." And the other guy says, "Oh, I'm stacking bricks." And then the third guy, who's very happy and very dialed in and doing great work, says, "I'm building a cathedral that's going to last 1,000 years." And so, yeah, he's doing the same thing, but he has this image in mind
Yep.
that really does begin to generate all kinds of subtle but very important adjustments, because it's not just about the brick on top of the brick, but he's looking at it, zooming in and out. And this ability to zoom in and out from the ends, the big picture, down to the means, the granular tactics of what we're doing, that is the mark of an amazing employee. When you get people who have that sense of connection. And it's the responsibility of the CEO and the C-suite to make sure that there's clarity and understanding about what those ends are out there.
And I think that's a really critical point to hit on, Randy, and that I like to talk about a higher purpose vision. What's that higher purpose vision look like?
Yes.
It's not built around goals. It's not built around market share or profitability or any of those kinds of things. It goes way beyond that. It's really, what is our higher purpose? Why do we exist? And then being able to create that vision in a succinct statement that says everything that we do is measured against this statement. So that every decision that we make, if it doesn't fit within the framework of that higher purpose vision, we're not doing it, or we're going to think awfully hard about it.
That.
And this is more and more important with these young folks coming into the workforce who demand that sense of value, veracity, importance to the work.
Right.
Because nobody wants to just...
Yeah, you look at Gallup's numbers. I mean, Gallup will tell you that the biggest reason why people leave their jobs or disengage isn't because of money. It isn't because of any of those kinds of things. It's because they can't connect their own meaning and purpose to the meaning and purpose of the organization.
That is the truth. So there's another concept in here I want to tease out just a little bit. I'm going to use dating and marriage as the example, because I think it's more appropriately painful for all of us. So here we go. So if you can remember, some of us can remember, like, I Love Lucy, and 1950s television. And so when you think about married couples in 1950s and 1960s television, the male and female roles were very, very different. The man was the guy who was supposed to go out and be the breadwinner and get the job and bring home the money, and the wife was going to stay home and wear her apron and do the cooking and deal with the rugrats that are around, and then hijinks ensue. And if you think about I Love Lucy, there was this role clarity was very clear. In other words, everybody sort of knew what the deal was, but always hijinks would ensue when Ricky had to be home or Lucy had to go do his job. So whenever the roles got switched, it was always madness and mayhem. So this is what I'm going to call a complementary relationship. A complementary relationship is when two people come together based on differences. I'm going to get along with you because you're different than me. Oh, you're really good with money and business, and I'm really good with the house and with food. And there we go. You can't cook, I can cook. So we're going to be together because we're different. Complementary relationships are very powerful. They're very hierarchical. Typically, you're going to see somebody's going to be the boss in that relationship, and somebody's going to be a one up and a one down individual there. But they're very, very stable, which is why if you think back to your grandparents and great grandparents, it was like, why didn't these people get divorced? It was because they couldn't. Where were you going to go? You were literally dependent on this individual for parts of your life that you could not do. You could not achieve.
That is so.
Yep.
I mean, that's something to think about. TV shows were based off. I mean, that's so, it's beautiful.
Yeah. So then if you look at the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we start getting to the Love Boat days, and all of a sudden people are starting to play with relationship structure. Oh, I don't want to be one down. I want to be equal to you. I want us to be married as equals. I want us to have equal engagement. All right. And so we're going to call that a symmetrical relationship. And a symmetrical relationship is where the husband and the wife, and I see this all the time, keep two separate checking accounts. They keep their money separate. They do their own things. They work it out. They sit down to pay the bills, and they kind of come together there. That was not the way my wife and I have done it, but that is a way that we see more and more and more with this idea of symmetry. So I had a couple of friends in graduate school who were very close people. They were we're equal, we're equal, we're equal. And they even had a thing when I went into their little apartment they had on their refrigerator. It's Monday, so it's my turn to do the dishes. On Tuesday, she'll do the dishes. And on Wednesday, I do the laundry, and then she does the laundry. I mean, they split everything up. This is back in the days when albums were being bought. When he bought an album, he would put his name on the album. Blew my mind. And they had a great relationship for about 5 years. And then it went bad. And he joked to me later, and he said, well, I said, how was the divorce? And he said, it really wasn't bad. It took about an hour because,
Names on everything.
they had separate checking accounts. They had their name on all their stuff. It was like, there we go. It's done. So what we know about symmetrical relationships is they're very dynamic. They manage change very well. In other words, if those two people had gotten shipped off to China to do a new job, they do really well because they're working together. It's not a stable relationship, but it is a change-ready relationship. Complementary, the old we're different. You can't change those people. Very difficult to change it. It's a stable relationship, but it is not change ready. And so this is the tension. And there is one more, and I'm going to drop it out and then I'm going to shut up. The third structure is called a parallel relationship structure. And this is one where the two parents, and this one I remember very clearly with my wife and I, we found out we're going to have our first child. We looked at each other and said, okay, from now on, it's all about the kid.
Exactly.
Our goal has just changed. It's no longer about us. It's about the kid. And so now we have this shared goal. And so parallel says, you do this and I'll do that. We're like train tracks. We're going to work together, but it's always about that other thing, the end's guidance called our kids are the most important thing in our lives right now. So that's where it's going to be. And that creates a very parallel relationships can be dynamic. The trick there is you got to communicate. Everything is negotiable. You can't assume, well, I thought you were going to pick up the kids from school. Well, no, I told you I wasn't going to be able to do that because blah, blah, blah. That's what's got to happen in a parallel relationship.
All right, let's talk about that in the music business side of things. So
Go for it.
Because we definitely lived a little bit of all of it, but mostly, for sure, most of our lives, the parallel relationship. Once we had our first child, it definitely became parallel and quit working, but she started working. So she quit working, but her real job really started. And
Good example.
Later, and I'm on the road now. So I'm gone 200 and something days on a bus a year. I come back and communicating with her was important because I came back like the carnival just showed up. Right. And that was really messing things up for her. And she told me, she goes, wait a minute, you can't come here, and it be Christmas every.
This happens in the military all the time.
So really
come back from deployment,
Yeah, because you feel like you missed all this thing and you sort of
just
wanting to buy.
My son-in-law.
What was that, Mike?
My son-in-law just came back from deployment a couple of months ago, and we saw it there. He was gone for 6 months and left with a brand new baby. And my stepdaughter took care of this baby by herself for 6 months, and now all of a sudden he comes home, and it's like, we got to kind of figure this out now.
Yeah. I mean, you got to get on. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is, in that situation, the track only runs one way.
Yep.
The one.
I think he's figured that out.
Yeah, they've worked so hard on structure.
Yeah,
and they've got things relatively structured.
Right.
It depends how old the child is and all that. But they've gone through most of the sleepless nights themselves, most of this, and they've finally gotten things to where they're able to cope.
Right.
And then you come home and you just blow the bridge up, blow the tracks up.
That's right.
I learned pretty quick, and well, maybe over a period of years. I'm not going to say pretty quick, but we did that. But in business, as I started to take on my own label and take on my own things, Gwen started to handle the checkbook, handle all the accounts. She's really good with all of the royalties at Red Eye. I mean, that spreadsheet,
she's crazy complicated.
That drives me crazy. So I cannot be the creative guy. And I'm not using that as an excuse because I'm doing plenty of the physical work and going, obviously I got to be the one on stage or I got to be the one with all that. But this parallel, which I've never thought about it being that way, the last probably 12, 15 years of our lives are like in such great sync.
Yeah.
There's just less stress on our relationship and there's more success because we're in control of it all. And we both know what's going on. So we represent one person in a way.
That's right.
Talking about getting married as one, we finally got that way. But it took a long time to become one, so, but very collaborative now. And I love hearing that parallel. I'm going to tell Gwen all about this.
Well, and
Yeah,
Later
for
on.
sure.
I think the other thing is now that the kids have grown and gone, the
Yeah.
higher purpose vision changes. I mean, certainly they're still important, but the higher purpose vision now is really your foundation and the work that you want to do through that and all of these things that you want to do from that perspective. So you want to continue to generate that success so you can do these things that now are a different higher purpose vision.
Yeah. And I've told Gwen her higher purpose vision is me.
Exactly.
Well,
I've had that conversation too. It's
Yeah.
a tough one.
Mine didn't go well.
And Patty and Gwen all know that drill.
Yeah, that's not happening. But we can take those words, those three words, and apply them to organizations. So, is there a complementary organization? Well, yeah. If you go to a hospital, it's extremely complementary. The doctor is the doctor, and the doctor is going to do doctor things, and the doctor does not expect the nurse to do doctor things, and vice versa. So, those rules and roles are extremely clear. And there's going to be a hierarchy. And you can almost always tell it's a complementary organization when people have uniforms or they have badges. That means, that's showing me how that hierarchy works, because that is how it is the differences between them that allows them to work. And usually when lives are on the line, complementary organizations work best. So you're going to see that in the military and everywhere else.
Ask you this, both of y'all. My son's a brand new doctor. He was on call the other day, and he had he was on his own. And so, what if you haven't? And he doesn't. This is not relative to what he told me, but you got me curious. What if you've got a nurse that's been there 35 years and he just became a doctor? Can there be a tug and pull? Now he is not brought this up at all. I'm just preparing myself of maybe if it is, what to tell them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is where, you have to really understand yourself. And while it's like that leader who knows they're quote unquote the leader, but that does not mean they know everything. And it does not mean they are aware of everything. And so if I've got somebody who's been there for 35 years and knows the inside out, the first thing I'm going to do when I get in is I'm going to look at that person and go, I'm going to need some help here. I'm going to make that deal before we even get going. Your feedback is going to be welcome here. Yeah. So yeah, I got the MD, but you tell me what I'm missing, because I need your eyes wisdom too.
Yeah.
You got to make that formal invitation though. Otherwise that nurse might well just sit there and stew, with his or her arms crossed, like, what a jerk, what kind of arrogant young doctor are you?
Right. Yeah. And that's all getting back to the idea of humility. I mean, as a person in that role or as a leader in any organization, if you're not exercising humility, I can guarantee you're going to have a lot of nurses with that scowl on their face, because, or any other title that they might have, because again,
they'll be talking about you when you're out of the room too.
That's exactly right. And I can guarantee your disengagement numbers are going to be awfully high.
Well, first of all, Adrian is full of humility. If I can tell you that.
I can too. Yeah.
Bragging on himself, talking about himself. He does not feel, he doesn't feel not necessarily uncomfortable. He doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
He doesn't even think about it. He says, move that over. Very compassionate, and he wouldn't even call me about this, but maybe I would ask, so it's interesting. I agree with you. I think that's how he would handle it.
And you can have a symmetrical organization too. So like when I was doing work at Microsoft, it was very interesting, particularly later in my time there, they would have whole buildings where they would say, well, we have this new office standard where there's really, and when you go look at their offices, there's not a lot of personal stuff in the offices. It's not like people hang stuff on the walls or put pictures on the desk. Everything feels like a little workspace where you're going to be in there for a temporary period of time. And so you begin to feel the idea that what the Microsoft offices look like is they're ready to move at a moment's notice. Your office is just the place you're working. It's not where you're planting, because I'm going to be here for 6 months, and then I'm going to be in Singapore for 6 months, and then I'm going to be in India for 6 months, or wherever. So there's no sensibility that everything is stable. In fact, just the opposite. So having big hierarchy gets too clunky in that environment. You have to be much more dynamic. So when you hear people talking about cross training, I want my team to be entirely cross trained. That's telling you have a symmetrical organization, and there's nothing wrong with it. Highly dynamic, highly change ready, but very fragile.
That's what I was going to say, Randy. You really talk, I talk about the idea of stability as a monk principle.
Right.
And the Benedictines have talked about that rootedness and that stability for 1,500 years. And I think it is very fragile, because if you don't have that stability, if you don't have that groundedness, people can fly all over the place.
And they do.
They do.
And they do. And it is, so when you go look at the organizational dynamics, the HR people at Microsoft, God love them. I mean, it's just madness, because the people they need, many of them, they're different. They're different breeds. They're looking for unicorns everywhere. I mean, they're looking for people who are like amazing at this or amazing at that. And they're often on a spectrum somewhere because they're so doggone smart, they can't talk to anybody else. So
right.
It's just a really completely different environment to be in.
Kind
and
of
that's
good.
where you get the leadership really needing to say, here's the parallel track that we want to be on. That's when the end needs to be super compelling.
You get fired, it's kind of good, because if there's nothing on your desk, you don't have to do the walk of shame and carry the box out.
That's exactly right.
You can just
Email.
sneak right on out of there. Yeah.
Where did Bobby go? Where'd he go? I just saw him. He had a cup of coffee in his hand. What happened? He hadn't been here in a week.
So I'll tell a super quick story about something that happened at Microsoft. I was not in the room when this happened, but boy, did I feel it. This was years ago. This would have been maybe 2010 or something like that. And a speaker that they had used several times was being brought back, and he was speaking to a room of about 200 people. And he was a lawyer, and he was talking about some of the issues associated with copyright law or whatever. And he's doing this presentation. He's on the stage and he's talking, and he said something about some case that he was involved with in another state. Well, this is back when smartphones were just emerging, and some young hotshot in the audience goes on his phone and looks up what the guy was talking about and finds out in real time that what the guy was talking about wasn't entirely true. He was misrepresenting what he said he had done in the situation. So he gets up, he goes to the back of the room, he talks to the sponsor and says, hey, this guy is telling, this isn't true. This is not what's going on. And this is Microsoft. The boss said, huh. And then stood in the back of the room and he said, walks down to the guy at the podium, pulls him aside, fires him on the spot, and walks him out the door.
Was he trust the guy that told him that? Did he trust that guy?
Yeah, the phone, he's like, look, the guy says he's doing this, but he didn't say it. So it was like, that's not happening. You're gone. And this guy had been there. He'd been working there for like 15 years. He'd been doing this gig, and now it's blown up and gone. And I don't know about you, but I've just been doing a couple of speeches. And it's so funny to me. I can talk about something, and in 1 second, they're looking it up.
Oh, yeah.
They're checking it out.
Yeah.
I was talking about sock guy socks, and several people came up to me after it was over and said, yeah, I just bought some. And I was like, what? It was like, yeah, you said it.
Oh, yeah.
I found it. I bought it. And now they're in my, they're being shipped to me.
Yeah.
That's the world we live in now, where
right. I can't tell you how many times I've mentioned a book that I've referenced or something in one of my speeches, and 10 people walk up to me afterwards and say they just bought it, so. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I think we're at a stopping point here, guys. Steve, why don't you bring us home today?
Well, how about that? Well, this could get a little bit weird. I can tell you, you haven't let me drive home yet, Dad.
Time to learn.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the most important thing I've personally learned is this parallel collaboration, and how I believe that today's generation is probably doing a lot of that, even though they may not have a name to it. I do believe that it's important that as a husband and wife, or a president and vice president, CEO, president, whatever team total, that you all give it a little time, listen to each other, no matter how young, no matter how old,
right,
no matter how unexperienced or experienced, give everybody that chance. I've also learned that I was doing things probably pretty good by thinking them in my head, going through all these emotions, not showing what I felt outside. I kept it internally. And then it all sort of worked out because everybody came to the best decision, because I believe everyone was looking at the end goal.
Yes.
And that right now, to me, the end goal, if you all have that in your mind, rather than just what's in front of you today, then you all are going to come to probably a pretty common decision, and it's going to work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Look at you. You got us home.
All right. Well, nice. Nicely.
Lay down. No, lay down.
All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for joining us on Resonance. Again, you can find the podcast on all the major platforms, or if you want to watch the video and see Steve in his hat, you can just go to YouTube and watch it there. Make sure that you're giving us some thumbs up and some comments and subscribing and sharing and all those kinds of fun things. And we will see you next time on Resonance.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, go to resonanceleader.com, check the website out, and it'll lead you to everything. And don't forget to share and give us your love. We appreciate it. And by the way, Man of Many Hats also has a lot of hair. Just FYI.
We'll get his hair on the next one. All right. See you guys.
Later.
Thanks for listening to Resonance. Find us at resonanceleader.com.